wounded, seriously wounded 900. 232 were killed and 900 were wounded in the first 48 hours of fighting. You know how long this fighting went on around this area? 2 weeks. The fighting was fast and furious, and after 2 weeks of fighting, it ended. All 84,000 Viet Cong guerrillas killed. All of them. Now I want you to think what that might mean. So after the first 48 hours of fighting, 232 American soldiers were killed and 900 wounded. The fighting was fast and furious, and after 2 weeks of fighting, all Viet Cong invaders were killed. They gave up 84,000 to our approximate 232, although there were a few more than that. Once we got organized and weren't surprised, we didn't lose a lot of soldiers. You follow what I'm saying? We obviously kicked their rear, right? But what do they almost remind you of? These kamikaze pilots. I mean, these guys don't, they lost more people. Think about this. They lost more soldiers in the Tet Offensive in 2 weeks than we lost in the entire Vietnam War, about 60,000, a little less than 60,000, and we're throwing the fit of the century back in the United States over that. We have a wall, which is an awesome thing, dedicated to those men that were killed. They lost 84,000 in 2 weeks. That'll make a point later. Now, guess who was in Vietnam covering the Tet Offensive when it happened? Just happened to be there when it occurred. Walter Cronkite. He was in Vietnam covering the war. He witnessed this, and he returned to the United States and was quoted saying publicly, not on television, this quote wasn't on television, but he was quoted saying to people within his circle of following, "What the hell is going on? I thought we were winning the war." That's what Walter Cronkite said when he got back.
Can you spell his last name?
Cronkite again is C-R-O-N-K-I-T-E. C-R-O-N-K-I-T-E. He got back and said among his inner circle, "What the hell is going on? I thought we were winning the war." Because he listened to Westmoreland too. So he prepares himself, and on his nightly newscast, this is what he says to the American people on national television. This is what Cronkite said. This is the most respected journalist at that point and maybe still today. This is what he said. You don't have to write it down. This is what he said concerning Vietnam. He said, quote, "To this reporter, it seems now more than certain that the bloody experience in Vietnam is to end in a stalemate, and that is the only rational way out will be to negotiate." Think about that. I'll read it again. "To this reporter, it seems now more than certain that the bloody experience in Vietnam is to end in a stalemate, and that the only rational way out will be to negotiate." Who's listening to that on national television?
Everyone.
President Johnson. And this is what President Johnson's comment was. He said this privately to his aides as they watched this on the television that night. He said, quote, "If I've lost Walter, then it's over. I've lost Mr. Average Citizen." So he knew that he was screwed as far as public opinion on Vietnam after Walter Cronkite made his comment. He was there and saw it. And this was shortly after, 10 weeks after. Okay? 6 weeks after the Tet Offensive, 6 weeks afterwards, because of the rosy picture that Westmoreland painted and what happened at Tet, reported by Walter Cronkite, President Johnson's approval rating dropped to 36%. I mean, that is bad. President Clinton had a 70% approval rating when he was in the middle of the Monica Lewinsky scandal. 36%. And only 26% of Americans approved of the way he was handling the war in Vietnam. So he had a 36% approval rating, which is one of the lowest in history. And only 26% of Americans approved of the way he was handling the war. And what started all over the country?
Riots.
Not riots.
Protests.
Protests. Protests all over the country after the Tet Offensive. I'm going to give you some examples. One in particular. In Washington, D.C., after the Tet Offensive, a crowd of about 100,000 protesters tried to close the Pentagon. Okay? In Washington, D.C., after the Tet Offensive, approximately 100,000 protesters, mainly what age? youth age, yeah, tried to close the Pentagon. Now you might say, what type of people were they? Some were radicals, some were liberals, some were conservatives, some were blacks, some were hippies, some were college professors, some were women's groups, and some were even war veterans. You have to write all those down. But the point being, you had a wide diversity of people that were at the Pentagon trying to close it down. It wasn't just crazy college kids. It was radicals, liberals, conservatives, blacks, hippies, professors, college professors, women's groups, and even war veterans there, okay? There was a clash between soldiers and demonstrators that were standing in line all the way across, holding weapons, ready to engage the demonstrators if they tried to take the Pentagon. It was getting to be an ugly scene. Violence, I mean, was this close to breaking out. So you had all these people surrounding, the Pentagon is obviously shaped in a pentagon. And they had all these soldiers that were basically surrounding the Pentagon, armed and ready to go if people tried to take the Pentagon. Do you think they were going to let these demonstrators take the Pentagon? No way. It got very tense. Very tense. Some of the more conservative protesters, seeing there was a possibility for an absolute nightmare, began to chant, "We're not against the soldiers, we're against the war." This is where the soldiers are standing. We're not against the soldiers, we're against the war. We're not against the soldiers, we're against the war. Somebody bright figured that one out because it was going to get ugly. And they all began to chant, "We're not against the soldiers, we're against the war. We're not against the soldiers, we're against the war." And I lent my book to Don Jolly, who's doing a report, but I'll get it back. One peaceful protester in that tense moment, looking eye to eye with a soldier with his gun ready to go, actually took a carnation and placed it in the barrel of the soldier's gun. And he told him, basically we don't want any trouble here. He actually took it and put it in the barrel of his gun. Pulitzer Prize winning photograph, which I will show you when I get my book back, but you can probably Google it, okay? So one peaceful protester to curb the intense moment placed a carnation in the barrel of a soldier's gun as a sign of peace as they continued their chant, "We're not against the soldiers, we're against the war." That was a tense time that could have been ugly as can be. So there were some smart people there. Another example of horrible things, how would you like to hear this all around the White House? If you're the President of the United States, and it's happening around the White House, it's happening in all college campuses, but how would you like to be the President sitting in his office in the White House, have the White House, in front of the White House, full of protesters chanting, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" I'm not kidding you. How would you like to be the guy to listen to that outside the White House? I mean, unbelievable. You'll see examples of it when I show you some video. "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" In addition to that, you've got a lot of young males on college campuses and around the White House lighting a fire to their draft card yelling, "Hell no, we won't go. Hell no, we won't go," as they burn their draft cards. Because when you register for the Selective Service, you get a draft number. I told you how that worked, right? They give you a draft card. So you have your name on it, Social Security number on it, your draft number. Split her up. So think of that. That's what happened after the Tet Offensive. Which is going to lead us to our next subtopic, which is understandable, which is what? The fall of LBJ. Now remember, kids, this guy can run for another term, right? Because he served out the rest of President Kennedy's term after the assassination. He was elected to his own term in 1964, and people expect him to run in 68. Now, when we talk about the fall of LBJ, in most instances in history, if the incumbent wants to run again, they have little or no problem getting the nomination of their party. And nobody ever challenges them. Okay? Did President Obama receive a challenge in the last election from his own party? No. It's a done deal. Well, because of the troubles in Vietnam, Senator Eugene McCarthy, who's right here, Senator Eugene McCarthy right here, of Minnesota, decides that he's going to challenge President Johnson for the Democratic Party nomination in 1968. One of the first times in history anybody challenged an incumbent or sitting president who wanted to run for re-election. So because of the issues in Vietnam, the way people felt, Senator Eugene McCarthy of Minnesota, made the decision that he would challenge an incumbent president, President Johnson, for the Democratic nomination for president in 1968. And what did he have to do to be effective to challenge him? Oppose everything Johnson enacted during the Vietnam War. That's all he has to do. It's not that difficult. I oppose everything he's doing in Vietnam. Only 26% of Americans think he's doing right. And who's he going to get support of, especially with his stand? Younger generation of Americans. So McCarthy opposed all policies that President Johnson had enacted concerning the Vietnam War, and he had total support of the younger generation of Americans, almost to a person, and he also had support from other people. Okay? So he's in a good shot. So if you think about it, the mind of younger Americans, a vote for McCarthy is a vote against what? The Vietnam War. Not so much Johnson, but the Vietnam War. It's even a silent protest. If I don't like Johnson, what he's doing, I'll vote for McCarthy. McCarthy's sitting in the catbird seat. So he's starting to make some progress in these primaries. Who's got his eye on him? Who's watching him the entire way, McCarthy? Who's watching him like a hawk and his successes? Huh? Robert Kennedy, who has since become Senator of New York. What he did is he left as Attorney General after 1 year with Johnson, didn't particularly care for him, you remember that? He moved to New York, and it was a little bit controversial because he really wasn't a resident, and he ran for the Senate and won. So Senator Robert Kennedy of New York is watching McCarthy's success just with intriguing interest. And he's seeing that McCarthy's making a big impact with the Democratic Party. And he's thinking to himself, well, gee whiz, I'm a little more popular than McCarthy. He can get this kind of action. Boy, just think of what I could get. So, on March 16th, 1968, on March 16th, 1968, Senator Robert Kennedy of New York announces he will be a candidate for the Democratic nomination for president. So now, you have McCarthy, who's going to run. You have Robert Kennedy that's going to run. And the word is certainly clear that Johnson will run. But this is the first time in many, 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 many years that an incumbent faced any kind of a challenge in the primary election to get the nomination. We'll finish with this. Think of the serious pressures that Johnson has on him right now. There's three really serious pressures. Some you know about, some you don't. And I'll kind of set you up for tomorrow. First of all, McCarthy and Kennedy are pushing him for the nomination of his party. That's pressure. Okay, he didn't expect that. He thought he would just be no problem getting the nomination. So his first big pressure is he's got two guys, McCarthy and Kennedy, pushing him for the Democratic nomination. What else is he still getting spanked on? But specifically, the Tet Offensive. So the Tet Offensive and the results of the Tet Offensive also got tremendous pressure on him. Big time. Those are things you know about. The third thing that's requested of him even puts more pressure on him and forces him to make a decision.
Withdraw.
No, just the opposite. General Westmoreland comes to him and he wants 206,000 more troops committed to Vietnam. That's what he feels it's going to take to win there. So not only does he have McCarthy and Kennedy pushing him for the Democratic nomination, and not only is he still getting spanked over the Tet Offensive and its results, now Westmoreland is in his ear saying, hey, we're going to win this, I need 206,000 more troops. What is going to happen if he commits 206,000 more troops as far as you, I mean, it's just, yeah. So, he's going to ask somebody their opinion. When I get myself in trouble, this is where we'll end. He's going to ask somebody his opinion and for his support. Who would he turn to try to get opinion and support to send 206,000 more troops? Who's he going to bring into the Oval Office and say, man, I need your support on this. I need you to back me on this. Who? No. Think back.
Is it McCarthy?
No.
Walter? It's not.
Who's the most powerful man besides the president, probably, in American politics?
Oh, no, the Speaker or the Speaker of the House.
No. You're close. Who's the majority leader in the Senate? You better know this. This room is postered with stuff of his. Mike Mansfield. Very good, my dear. He brings Senate Majority Mike Mansfield from Montana in to talk to him about his philosophy and if he can support him in the request that Westmoreland has for 206,000 more troops. Tomorrow I will tell you what Mansfield's opinion of that was. And I'm gonna tell you this as a prelude, I really feel bad, if anybody should have lived forever, it should have been Senator Mansfield. To sit in his office in Washington DC with my class and have him tell this story instead of mine that I'm gonna tell you tomorrow, it was awesome. It was just an incredible thing. I still can't believe this day I did not record that, so I could keep it forever. But anyway, we'll tell you what Mansfield's response was tomorrow to Johnson. Okay? Good lecture, guys. Nice job.